Welcome to this explainer. Today we're taking a really fascinating journey into something we literally all do every single day, but almost never stop to actually think about. I'm talking about learning. We're going to dive deep into the work of Peter Jarvis. He's an internationally renowned researcher who actually started out in theology and sociology before completely transforming how we understand adult education. See, Jarvis argues that learning is not just about, memorizing facts to pass a test. It's about the fundamental, everyday existence of being human. I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through his insights today because we're going to connect high-level academic theory directly to the reality of your everyday life.
Okay, let's kick things off with a fantastic little exercise that Jarvis used to run during his pre-retirement courses. He would put a really simple question up on a flip chart. Who am I? And he'd ask people to write down, I am a, and basically complete that sentence 10 different times. Well, what do you think happened? Almost everyone put their job title right at the very top of the list. But then Jarvis would hit them with a pretty tough follow-up question. Who will you be when you retire? Think about it. When your entire identity is completely anchored to your occupation, what actually happens to you when that occupation disappears?
If you were to ask Jarvis that exact same question today, he'd give you this incredibly profound answer. He'd say, I am learning to be me. It's brilliant, isn't it? Learning isn't just a task you check off a list. It's the fundamental, lifelong process of forming your human identity. Every single day, literally until the end of your life, you are actively learning how to be yourself.
So here is our roadmap for today. 1. The identity question. 2. The gap of unknowing. 3. Beyond simple learning cycles. 4. Transforming the whole person. And finally, number 5. The unfinished self.
Section 1. The identity question. Understanding me in society. Let's dive in.
Jarvis realized pretty early on that you really can't just talk about me in a vacuum. The me only exists in relation to the society around us. Because of this, saying, I am learning to be me, actually forces us to ask 4 really profound questions. What or who is me? What is society? How does one interact with the other? And what do I actually mean by learning? Just by asking these, Jarvis pushes us way beyond basic psychology. Suddenly we're in the realm of sociology, philosophy, and philosophical anthropology. To truly understand learning, we first have to understand the human being.
Moving right along to Section 2. The gap of unknowing, the spark of learning.
So if learning is how we form our identity, what actually triggers it? Well, Jarvis argues that learning doesn't start with an answer, it starts with a gap. He calls this gap disjuncture. This is the precise moment when our past biography, our history, just doesn't quite match up with what we're experiencing right now. It's this sudden sense of not knowing. It's that exact split second where you can no longer take your daily world for granted. Now, it could be an overt, spoken question, or it might just be a sudden, unfamiliar bodily sensation. But this gap is the absolute spark of all human learning.
Now, there is a totally fascinating difference between how children and adults experience this gap. Children are basically in a state of constant disjuncture. They don't know the world yet, so they are constantly asking, why? What's that? How does this work? Adults, on the other hand, build up all these categories and classifications. We do this to survive and essentially operate on autopilot, taking our life world completely for granted. The sociologist Zygmunt Bauman notes that our modern world is liquid, it's rapidly changing, but we still desperately try to rely on our pre-programmed adult autopilot. But the reality is, no matter how old we get, new situations are always going to force us right back into that disjuncture.
When we hit that gap of unknowing, we process it through 2 distinct types of experiences. First, we have primary experiences, which are just raw bodily sensations. Imagine walking into a room and catching a sudden, completely unidentifiable scent. You have absolutely no meaning for it yet. It's just pure sensory data. Secondary experiences, however, are mediated through language and culture. So when we finally learn the meaning of that smell, we're actually incorporating the culture of our world into ourselves. Our society literally gives us the tools to label and understand our own experiences.
Okay, Section 3. Beyond simple learning cycles. Adding society.
Back in the 1980s, while running workshops, Jarvis asked adults to draw diagrams of their own learning experiences, and he quickly realized that traditional models were severely lacking. You might be familiar with David Kolb's famous 1984 learning cycle. It's a neat 4-step loop going from concrete experience to reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation. Now, it's clean, it's elegant, but according to Jarvis, it is entirely too simple. Why? Because it completely omits the absolute most crucial element of being human: social context and social interaction. We simply don't learn in a vacuum.
So Jarvis developed his own model in 1987 based on real data from hundreds of adults, and the leap in complexity is stark. The big takeaway here is that human learning is messy. It involves so many different routes. Sometimes we practice, sometimes we evaluate, sometimes we literally just memorize. But most importantly, it all happens within a social situation. We get feedback from society, and that's what confirms if our new understanding is actually acceptable or not.
And you know, that social feedback is incredibly powerful. When we finally resolve our disjuncture, the answers we accept are very often social constructs. We internalize the culture around us so deeply that Pierre Bourdieu calls it a habitus, which is basically a socially made body. Because we learn to conform to the accepted meanings of our society, we can honestly sometimes become trapped by them. We run the risk of becoming, as Peter Berger famously put it, imprisoned behind the bars of our own minds.
Section 4. Transforming the whole person, body and mind.
To truly get to the bottom of learning, Jarvis says we have to ask who exactly is doing the learning. If it's the whole person, then we absolutely must understand the relationship between the body and the mind. Philosophers have debated this endlessly. You've got dualism, mind-brain identity, logical behaviorism, functionalism, the list goes on. But Jarvis flat out rejects overly simplistic models like behaviorism. Those models reduce us to mere public actions and totally ignore human meaning and emotion, which just doesn't capture the whole picture.
Instead, the most compelling framework for human learning aligns really closely with something called non-reductive monism. Now, don't let the fancy term throw you. All this theory acknowledges is that while we are physical beings, our mental properties, our meanings, our intentions, our beliefs, and our emotions are real. They are distinct, and they absolutely cannot be reduced merely to brain chemistry or outward behavior. You need your physical body to experience the world through your senses for sure, but you desperately need your distinct mental properties to actually make meaning out of it. They are completely and totally intertwined.
The transformation of the person through learning illustrates this exact synergy beautifully. When we experience that gap of disjuncture, we don't just learn from the social situation itself, we learn from our own personal experience of that situation. Our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions all interact together. We process the experience, and the outcome isn't just some new memorized fact filed away in our brain. The outcome is a fundamentally changed, more experienced person. And because you have changed, the very next social situation you step into is altered as well. Learning transforms the sensation, it transforms the person, and ultimately, it transforms the social situation itself.
And that brings us to our final section, Section 5, the unfinished self, lifelong becoming. Let's pull all these threads together to finally answer that ultimate question of identity. Typically, psychologists like to trace learning from the individual outward into the culture. Sociologists do the exact reverse. They look at how the external culture points inward to shape the person. But Jarvis argues we actually have to hold both of these simultaneously. The person stands squarely in the middle of these forces, continuously internalizing the world around them, and then externalizing their own transformed self right back into it.
And that leaves us with this truly beautiful, profound paradox. For as long as I can continue to learn, I remain an unfinished person. We only exist right now, in the present moment. But because we are constantly colliding with a liquid world, constantly facing new gaps of unknowing, and constantly transforming our minds and bodies through experience, we are forever in a state of becoming. Being and becoming are inextricably intertwined. You are quite literally never a finished product. So as you step away from this explainer today and face your very next moment of disjuncture, I'll leave you with this one question. Who are you learning to become next?